Tell me what happened. What was it that you heard about Jimmy Savile?
What I heard was a patient who had been in Bournemouth for 8 years told me that he had sexually assaulted her and that he had then gone on to much younger girls. She said he had a preference for the younger women, and that the unit where she was had very young women, 16 and even younger than that, I believe. And she had become incredibly angry and upset about it, and she had confronted Jimmy Savile and told him that she was going to report him high up because she believed it was, my impression at the time, I can't remember exact words, but my impression I was left with was that she had felt that it was pointless to do anything but go to the top, because everybody was fully aware of what he was doing, and the fact that nothing was being done meant that she couldn't trust the staff who were around to do anything about it. And he had laughed in her face, is what I remember, that phrase very much, that she said he'd laughed in her face.
What made you believe her?
Because I could, you know, when people tell you about really traumatic things in their lives, particularly that kind of thing, sexual thing, you can tell by so many things about their body language, their eyes. It was genuine. It was, you know, I'd have laid my life on it. You know, I knew she was telling the truth. I knew it right through to my core, you know, absolutely.
And so what did you do?
Well, it was difficult because at that time we didn't have, as nurses, the kind of guidelines that we had nowadays. So there was no confidentiality policy. And she had asked me not to tell anyone. And I did make a decision to breach that, which obviously put me in a difficult position with her as well. But I tried to persuade her, but she was terrified of authority. She just wanted to keep her head down and get out, get free again, which I can absolutely understand. But I was really concerned about what she had told me, because clearly there were women who were continuing to be sexually assaulted, and he had a free rein. She told me that he had his own keys. She told me that he had his own rooms. She told me that he moved freely within the women's unit and around the hospital. She told me that he would come and pick and choose who he wanted. She told him she actually saw him, and so did, he was quite blatant that on one occasion she saw him having sex with a girl, and I believe my recollection is that she said under the stage, so whether there was some kind of, or behind the stage or something, in the theatre that they had. So women were continuing to be sexually assaulted, and from what she was saying, my impression was that in order for that to be happening in that way, you know, the obvious conclusion is that people must have been aware.
When you went and told someone in authority, presumably,
yeah.
who was it that you told, and what was the response to you?
I told the charge nurse where I was working, but again, the culture was very different then. For example, we had a social club in the hospital grounds, and I used to go to the canteen at lunch. My charge nurse and many of the particularly male staff would go to the social club, and you know, I saw them on the rare occasions I did go there. I would see them drinking, you know, 8 pints. I know beer was lower alcohol then, but it was still, you know, a good 8 pints that a lot of them used to drink, and come back, you know, drunk, clearly very laissez-faire, but sort of actually they were pissed, back to the ward. So as a woman, you know, and I think many of the women there did a lot of the legwork, and we weren't valued for our opinions, we weren't encouraged. I didn't feel I was encouraged for my opinions at all.
So when you said to the charge nurse, look, I've heard this about Jimmy Savile and his behaviour at Broadmoor, what did they say to you? What did this charge nurse say to you?
He was, thought I was crazy. I can't remember the exact words. I just know that he didn't take any notice. I was an irritation. I brought it up on several occasions. I was obsessed with it. Actually, I was completely obsessed with it. It bothered me tremendously. And it bothered me tremendously that he wasn't taking it seriously.
So did you try and go to someone else?
Yeah, I went to the rank above him, which was the nursing officer for the area that our unit was in. And
so we're not talking about Broadmoor here, of course. We're talking about another hospital.
That's right.
So they could perhaps justifiably say, well, this isn't our area, that's Broadmoor, this is us, it's not our responsibility to do anything about it.
I don't think there's ever a justification in life if you know that people are being inhumanely treated and criminally treated. If you hear of that, I don't think it's right in any era to say that's okay because it's happening somewhere else. You know, otherwise we're back to kind of the Holocaust, really.
What era are we talking about here?
Well, at the earliest, I'd say 78, and at the outset, 82, 83, between those years. And I can't be more specific than that, but I know that it was between those years.
So as far as you know, despite your best attempts, nothing was done?
I know nothing was done. And at times, I've mentioned before, you know, in the last few days that, and when I've been asked right at the very beginning, when I first disclosed what had happened a couple of years ago, that, you know, the police did come on several occasions. I know that a staff member has denied that, but I can tell you absolutely that the police did come on, you know, at least 2 or 3 occasions to the unit because the Broadmoor patients had been transferred there. I mean, obviously there were people who had committed very serious offences, and who had been incarcerated for many, many years in Broadmoor under special sections from the courts, who were then transferred to our hospital. So, you know, that required, you know, a court intervention and new legal powers under the old Mental Health Act. Can't remember the exact section, but it was a section 60 something. And, you know, the police did come to the unit and they would sit in the office, you know, with being pally with the staff, the male staff, and then I did actually go in once, and I just, you know, more than once actually, and I did speak about it.
So you told staff there and you told the police?
Oh, yeah.
And nothing happened?
Yeah, I mean, the police just reacted as though, well, I mean, I just remember the clip in my head, the picture in my head is, you know, one of the police officers looking towards, you know, my managers, and as if to say, you know, control your woman. It's just...
And it's felt to you all the way along that there was it was because it's a male-dominated area that the men weren't taking you seriously. It was because you didn't have the authority.
I think at that time, what I realised was that if I had continued to bring it up, the only thing I would have achieved would have been getting disciplined, getting sacked, and I wouldn't have actually achieved anything for the patients because I knew that everything was weighted against me. In those days, things were weighted against you. I have worked for many years in psychiatry, in many different places, and I've worked as a mental health advocate. And I think one of the crucial factors in this whole business that still exists and still needs to be addressed is that there has always been a problem with a them and us situation between staff and patients. Despite the fact that we know what the statistics are, it's still the case. I don't think many advocates or groups like Mind, patients' councils, patients' forums have been asked much about their commentary on what has happened with Jimmy Savile, and that to me speaks massively for what the crux of the problem really is.
Just finally, today, when you see these reports, do you feel at all vindicated, or you don't want to have...
Massive, massive, massive relief. I feel really happy, really pleased. I know it's a personal commentary, but I've been treated for cancer in the last year, and having that kind of diagnosis kind of strips away all the peripheral stuff, and I am so glad that whatever happens, that this is finally something that I've been able to say, this is what happened, and people are listening. It's wonderful, bloody wonderful. I just hope that the entire truth comes out. I think, you know, time will tell, and my gut feeling and everything about this smacks of, you know, there's a hell of a lot of either covering up or total blindness. It's like the emperor with no clothes. How on earth could somebody do that kind of thing so blatantly? And patients knew about it. And the great thing for Jimmy Savile and anybody who was complicit is that the group who are the witnesses, who are the victims, have had their mouths shut because of the position that they held and that they probably hold. And even now, you know, if you were a Broadmoor patient, you're going to come forward and say publicly, oh, when I was a Broadmoor patient. I think it's I think it's almost impossible for people to come forward, and that is why I blew the whistle on Broadmoor a couple of years ago, because I realised Broadmoor patients were never going to come forward. Yeah, I'm going to be truthful, yeah? With the stigma that's around, I wouldn't come forward and say, oh, by the way, when I was a Broadmoor patient, ... You know, they want their neighbours to know. It's incredibly difficult. That's why they're so vulnerable and still are.